Welcome back to AI Unscripted. Today we've an expert in AI governance joining us, Oliver Patel, the Enterprise AI Governance Lead at AstraZeneca. With a background that bridges academia, public policy, and global media, Oliver is at the forefront of responsible AI in the pharmaceutical industry and brings a wealth of experience in ensuring that AI technologies are safe, trustworthy, and ethically managed. Oliver, it's great to have you with us today.
Kieran, it's really great to be here today. Excited for this discussion and yeah, looking forward to getting into it. Thanks so much for bringing me onto your podcast.
My pleasure. Oliver, you've had a fascinating career working in academia, government policy, and now leading AI governance in pharma. Can you share a little bit about how each phase of your career has shaped your approach to AI governance today?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. And I know it sounds a bit cheesy, but I do feel genuinely privileged to be working on a topic and in a field that I've always been passionate about. And it's only in recent years that working on issues relating to AI governance, AI ethics has actually become a viable career path that someone can take in the corporate world and in the business world. So really, I would go back to my master's degree when I studied philosophy and public policy at the London School of Economics. That was really formative for me because I was introduced to various philosophical and ethical debates relating to AI for the first time. So I did modules in things like bioethics and things like consciousness and whether we can replicate human intelligence and human levels of consciousness in machine form. I studied philosophy of mind, all of these kind of wacky topics relating to philosophy, ethics, psychology. And I always found it really interesting. I was super engaged and passionate about that. And I knew what I sort of was interested in. But at that time, there were no sort of jobs in AI governance and AI ethics. It was an area of research and it was an area of academic interest, but it wasn't an industry like it is becoming today. So I spent a few years in working in academia, pursuing research on, different but associated topics like public policy, data privacy, because I always had this kind of interest at the intersection of technology and public policy. So I went down a path of looking at data privacy and data governance from an academic perspective. So I spent quite a few years at University College London. I then moved to the government. So I worked for the UK government for a couple of years where I negotiated the agreement between the EU and the UK to basically keep data flowing between the two countries after Brexit. So what we called the data adequacy agreement on cross-border data transfers after Brexit. But then I started to realize that actually this topic, this esoteric topic that I always had an interest in, AI ethics, AI governance, was starting to pop up more and more in the conversation. So it's really from about 2019 onwards that it's become a mainstay topic and surging up the global political agenda. And yeah, so I joined AstraZeneca at the start of 2023 to head up their AI governance function. And as I said, it's a privilege for me that I'm able to work on a topic that I was always academically interested in, but wasn't really a viable career path before. And now the AI governance profession is booming. So alongside my work at AstraZeneca, I also work with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. They have essentially established one of the market leading training programs and professional certifications for AI governance. And they recently announced that more than 10,000 professionals worldwide have taken that training. So this is really going to become something quite big. And I wouldn't have been able to predict that 10 years ago, I have to admit.
It's an awful pity. You could have said I predicted this 10 years ago, but it's always interesting to see how life turns out. It really is. And it always does, folks, for anyone listening in. Oliver, the pharmaceutical industry itself has unique challenges and potential when it comes to AI. Can you explain the role that AI plays and how it impacts operations and patient outcomes?
Absolutely. So when people ask me questions like this around how is AI and AI technologies and machine learning used in the pharmaceutical industry, the answer is there isn't sort of one big use case to win them all. As you know, Kieran, it's general purpose technology that's essentially, there's no domain of activity, there's no area of activity that won't in some way be impacted in and potentially benefited by the use of AI and the use of data-driven technologies. But at its core, one of the main problems or one of the main challenges for the pharmaceutical industry is the time it takes to discover and develop new medicines and to get those medicines to the patients who need them. So really, it can be a very long process of, on average between 10 and 15 years. And everything that can be done to speed up in a safe and responsible way, but to speed up the different constituent parts of that process, whether it's using AI or a totally different technology or organizational change, it's a big focus and a big priority for the sector as a whole. So this is not just about AstraZeneca. Every company is looking at this. So because it takes so long to discover and develop new medicines, and because doing so quickly could have such a transformative impact in terms of saving the patients or supporting the patients who need those medicines, anything we can do to speed up that process is really powerful. So obviously AI plays a huge role there. There's many different areas in which the use of AI could potentially lead to the acceleration of discovering, testing, and trialing new medicines. So that's key. But then when we look at generative AI, I'm not sure if pharma is sort of markedly different from other sectors in the sense that the ability to create content at scale, the ability to have enterprise chat, search, that kind of thing. I think there's a lot of parallels between all big corporates in terms of how they're using Gen AI. So yeah, it's there's a lot of stuff that's unique to pharma, but then there's also a lot of stuff that's kind of, I think, generic across enterprises with how they're using Gen AI to become more efficient, productive, and innovative.
Yeah, I'd like people to use it more. It's interesting, Oliver. I've seen companies publicly decrying or proudly suggesting that they've given up their Gen AI licenses, and you're sort of going, well, look, at $40 a month or $20 a month, if you can't think of one idea a day or two ideas that's going to generate general helpful advice and productivity, then there's something wrong with your ideas, not the cost of this. But in a highly regulated field like pharma, how do you ensure that there's compliance in the business, but without stifling, innovation? Are you using specific frameworks or best practices to get the team to follow that, to bridge that gap?
Absolutely. So the company I work for, AstraZeneca, published its AI ethics principles back in 2021. So it was one of the first pharmaceutical companies to do so. And then what we've been doing in the past few years is we've been establishing and implementing an enterprise AI governance framework. Really, the framework consists of 5 core pillars, and all of these pillars and all of this work is designed to enable us to essentially implement and operationalize our principles and values in practice in the context of our day-to-day AI-related activities. So the 5 pillars are the kind of policies and standards and our just overall policy and framework for AI and AI governance. The second pillar refers to how we do risk assessments, how we review new projects, new activities, and assess risks and mitigate those risks. The third pillar is how we keep track of AI activities across the organization and across the ecosystem. The fourth pillar is just how we're keeping track of all the regulations and ensuring that our internal policies and processes and ways of working are fit for purpose and align with those regulations as they continue to evolve at breakneck speed. And then the fifth and most important pillar, the one that I'm really passionate about, is how we are upskilling, training, and educating our workforce to be able to use and benefit from AI in a safe and responsible way. Because what I always say is that AI governance is change management. AI has existed long before AI governance. We can trace the history of AI back to the 1950s. There are many ways in which every major enterprise has been using AI for decades now. But what's changed in this era, it is a cliche, but since the launch of ChatGPT, is AI is now at the fingertips of all of us, of all employees, and that wasn't the case before. So the technology itself may not be as new as some people portray it is, but the democratization of it is, and that's why essentially doing AI governance and really just implementing an AI strategy effectively is all about change management. Because the point you made earlier about some companies dropping their AI programs or sort of de-investing from Gen AI because they don't see the benefit, I think that is at its core more of a people problem than a technology problem.
Yeah, I think that's IT's dirty secret, though, isn't it? That very often people hold it up, not the actual technology itself. But we're not allowed to talk about that, I think, sometimes. One thing you're mentioning there, just in terms of you got your principles, got your values, got those five, and you mentioned earlier on about the government as well. One thing you're seeing in EU legislation is, or AI governance is the explainability and the interpretability of models. If we're using deep algorithmic models, complex AI to discover drugs and proteins or mixtures or whatever else, how do you make sure that the AI is interpretable, is explainable to stakeholders like regulators, clinicians, patients, or anyone who's interested? Because that seems like quite a feat.
Yeah, it's a really hot topic in the field. So I think first of all, there's a lot of different concepts that get discussed about that are all slightly different. So transparency, we could think of it as more of an umbrella term for all sorts of things, like which are at its core about enabling people to understand how, where, why AI is being used, what it's doing, what the impact is. So we've got transparency as a kind of foundational concept. Then we have explainability, which is more around the ability to explain to different audiences and stakeholders how an AI model may have generated a particular output, what elements of the just being able to explain how it works, why it did what it did. And then interpretability, which is slightly more technical and refers to how someone could actually assess the inner workings of a model in order to generate that explanation. So if you could look at interpretability and explainability as part of a broader kind of transparency agenda. So the first thing I would say in answer in response to the question is, it really depends, and it depends on the use case and it depends on the context. There'll be some contexts where explainability, interpretability, and transparency more generally are mission critical. You think about a context of decision making, an arena that could really impact someone's life, such as recruitment, or you look at in the public sector, sort of judicial decision making, for example. In those contexts, it would probably be you'd be in a difficult place from a legal perspective if you weren't using AI models, which you could, using available techniques, interpret and explain. However, as you mentioned, there are more advanced models, such as large language models, such as really advanced deep learning models, where we do not yet have really robust techniques to really deeply interpret, understand, and explain why particular outputs have been generated. So it would always be dependent on the use case, and we'd have to make a decision as to whether it was appropriate to use a certain type of technique or model to solve a particular problem. And that's why we need to look at each use case by case, because what model we choose has a direct impact on how explainable and interpretable it can be. So in a nutshell, in some contexts, it's mission critical, and that needs to inform the type of AI model that's used. In other contexts, we might actually just think that accuracy and robustness, i.e. the model working well, is more important than being able to understand, explain, and interpret why it does what it does.
So play back just a little bit of more final advice. If people want to introduce AI governance within their actual operations, what's the sort of practical advice you would give them, and what are the pitfalls they need to avoid?
Yeah, so I'll try and land three key tips here. So first of all, we live in an era where AI is just going to become the new software. AI will become embedded in and infused with all software applications and digital applications and devices we use. Therefore, AI governance does not and cannot mean governing all AI. So the first tip is you have to take a risk-based approach, and you have to be proportionate, because it's never going to be possible in AI governance to wrap your arms around absolutely everything. The second tip, as I said before, is that AI governance really is about change management. So you could have the best policies, principles, and processes in place, but unless you're bringing all the relevant stakeholders along on the journey with you, you're not going to get anywhere. And the third and final point is that, again, it's linked to people. You need to make sure you've got buy-in from the right people at the right levels to do this. That is senior level buy-in, of course, to make sure that what you want to advance with AI governance is supported, is sponsored, and you have what you need. But perhaps more importantly, AI governance professionals and people who want to drive this work in their organizations, they need to learn how to speak the language of AI and data science. They need to be winning over the technical community within their organizations, the people who are actually building this stuff and deploying these models, because often there's a bit of a disconnect between the governance world and the technical world. And I'm not saying that you need to sort of learn how to code if it's not your thing. However, you need to be able to speak the language they speak, and you need to be able to empathize with them. You need to be able to understand their challenges, their priorities. What are they working on? Why does it matter? And how will your governance impact them, potentially negatively, potentially positively? If you get all of that right, then you can actually position governance as an enabler and a core part of the overall AI strategy. And it can enable the business to safely and securely adopt AI at scale, and perhaps even more quickly, because there's more confidence that there are controls in place, there are guardrails in place. So if you get it right, AI governance can be a core enabler of the business, but you need to approach it in the kind of more nuanced way that I've been outlining.
I love all those descriptions and definitions, and I love the fact, Oliver, that you've said, look, it's ultimately a people opportunity or people problem. Take your pick depending on the moment that you're actually in. But it feels like a change management piece, and I'm absolute fan and behind you all the way. I think your education piece inside of a business of understanding what AI is and isn't is absolutely key. It will and is becoming a fundamental part of any business, not a what I would describe as a hype technology, but a real technology that, as you mentioned earlier on, it's an overnight success for the last 80 something years, having been brought around in 1955, as opposed to when ChatGPT was launched. Oliver, if people want to find out a little bit more about you, how do they manage to do that?
Yeah, so first of all, thanks so much, Kieran, for this discussion. It's been really great, and I feel really energized on a Monday morning talking to you about these topics. If people want to connect with me or follow me, LinkedIn is the best place. I post loads of content there about all of these topics: AI governance, AI policy, AI and Gen AI, and digital technologies more broadly. So connect with me on LinkedIn, and you'll get loads of content there. And also you'll be able to learn about the different trainings and courses that I'm involved in as well.
Fantastic. And it is excellent content as well. You may be too polite to say that, but I am not. Oliver, thank you very much indeed. It's amazing to be equally energized to hear someone who started out not quite knowing how far their career would take them, doing a master's that they purely enjoyed, to someone whose face lights up when they talk about their topic. I wish you every success, sir.
Thank you so much.